Hi, everybody, and welcome to this very special edition of a Property CEO Open Door. Now, this is an election special. Now, as you probably know, we've got this very important day coming up on the 4th of July, where the Tories and the Labours are going to be battling it out. And it seems to be a pretty much a foregone conclusion, or maybe not, that the Labour Party will get in with quite a large majority. So we thought it would take the opportunity to really sort of talk about it from a small scale property developer's point of view. And just to turn the tables a little bit, just things a little bit the other way round, I'm going to be interviewing the founder and CEO of Property CEO, Mr. Ritchie Clapson. Hello, Ritchie.
Hello there. What a turn this is. I'm actually the guest on my own show. I love it.
Yeah, we thought it'd be a bit of a change for you. Well, we've got quite a bit of controversy going on at the moment with regarding the possible changes with permitted development. Now, at Property CEO, we absolutely love permitted development because we like to go for the shortcuts. We like to go for the low-hanging fruit. It's well acknowledged and accepted that the current planning system, unfortunately, is broken. So we need a quicker way of getting our buildings and our opportunities approved, and we're using permitted development. So we are quite concerned at the moment as to whether the change in government, the possibly inevitable change in government, is going to affect our permitted development rights. So what do you think, Richie? Do you think there's going to be a big change?
What, a change in government?
Yes, well, not changing government, but will there be a change in permitted development policy? What do you think?
Well, first of all, is there going to be a change in government? Everything seems to suggest that Labour will get in,
Yeah.
and I suspect it will. Uh, am I worried from a small scale developer's point of view? No. Do I think there's going to be any significant changes? No. There's certainly, I've listened to or been referred to a number of people that are out there and been interviewed and saying, "Oh my word, it's all going to change under Labour." And yeah, it grabs headlines. It gets people to watch what they're saying. I'm not sure that's absolutely correct. I don't think fundamentally. I don't think there's going to be any significant change with Labour coming in at all. I really don't, in terms of the small scale development property business and what we're trying to achieve. And
Right.
I think anyone that suggests there's a bit of scaremongering, headline grabbing out there. And I think there's lots of reasons why. But first of all, no change.
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, I think there's an awful lot of double speak at the moment because both parties are speaking to basically very different audiences, and they are, like I say, vote grabbing, and they pretty much are saying the same things as regard to planning. Okay. So I'm looking at this. I mean, both parties are looking to pledge 1.5 million. Well, Labour's saying 1.5 million over the next 5 years. Tories are saying 1.6 million. But the thing is, and I'm sure you agree with that, we simply don't have the structure, the processes, and so on to actually deliver that. We don't have the planning system. We don't have the boots on the ground to actually do this. So again, do you agree that permitted development has got to be the way forward because of the light touch planning process that it involves? And
Yeah,
obviously, we're looking at conversions as well, rather than digging up the ground and bigger scale market housing. What do
yeah.
you
Sorry,
think?
sorry, Colin. Yeah, I mean absolutely, I do, and I think it tickled me that Labour was saying 1.5 million, which has basically been the Tories' number, and
Yeah,
then Sunak comes out with 1.6. I thought, oh, look at that, great, you're going to deliver 1.6, another 100,000. It's just made up numbers, and interesting enough, Colin, way before the election, so I think it was sometime last year, it might have been early this year, I can't remember. I had one of the Sunday business presses interview me, ring me up and interview for to go into the publication, and it was about how many houses do we need in the UK? What about the 300,000 number? And I think that's an interesting place to start with because they're all on about this number, but there's lots of perhaps topics or discussions around where's that number? Is that real? Isn't it real? Some people say we need 600,000 a year. Some people are saying we need less. And the point I made, and I actually did this I was on stage the other week at a property conference, and I said, look, I'm a simple bloke. I'm not a complicated fella, okay? I'm not highly educated. I'm just a simple bloke out there, but I've been around a long time. And I said, here's my analogy, okay? It's like a coffee shop. And you don't, I can't say how many coffees I've got to make, but when the queue outside the door goes round the block, I've got to keep making coffees because the queue's still there. Right. And I said, the housing market's a bit like that. When people live on our streets, when people live in one-room B&Bs and they're single mums, and they've got a full-time job and 2 kids, and they've got to live in a one-room B&B, that's the coffee shop queue. There's still people that need houses. We don't have enough. When rents are way up there, that means we don't have enough. So the coffee shop queue is still there, which means we need lots of numbers.
Yeah.
I agree with you in terms of how we're going to do it. Because again, I wrote an article earlier this year, published in a few places, and I can't tell you where, to be fair, but I basically put a call upon the government, Conservatives at the moment, to say, look, okay, the election's coming up. The only way we're going to solve the housing crisis in this country is take the politics out of it. Yeah, have the politics around the rest of the stuff, but take the politics out of housing and let's have a cross-party collaboration, which obviously no one's going to listen to me, because why would they listen to some old bloke that's in development for over 40 years? No, not interested. And I said to them, it's got to be a cross-party collaboration because, Colin, as you say, you can't. I mean, how long has this planning system been broken, would you say?
Oh, crikey. Well, to be honest, it's really started, the rot started to set in when the PD had the massive upchange in 2015. So we're looking at 10 years, which is pretty much most of the Tory, government. So, yeah, and it's been getting progressively worse. Obviously, COVID did not help, and working from home and all those things, but there has been massive cutbacks financially and so on with the planning system. So yeah, it's been broken a long while.
So it's been broken 10 years, okay? And I don't necessarily think, let's be non-political, but I don't think it's a Conservative problem. I think the planning system was destined to fail.
No, it's a resources problem.
Yeah, it's a resources problem. It's probably outdated in the way they did it.
Sure.
And I think, the reality is we don't build enough homes. We need to build more homes. And forget the election grab with 1.6, 1.5. We don't get anywhere near that at all. So unless the parties work together, you can't solve the planning system in its historic shape or form in a political term in 5 years. You can't. In my opinion, it's impossible. And what you'll be doing, you'll be having a whole load of disruption, a whole load of problems, no success by the time you're due to be elected next, in which case no political party is going to do it.
Yeah.
That's why the only way cross-party collaboration works. So the only other option, knowing that cross-party collaboration on housing is not going to happen in this country because our political system doesn't allow it, we have to have a short-circuit system. And so no government, even if and I think politically, I thought the other day, the fella, Sir Ed Davey, I watched 3 clips of him over a few days. One, he fell off a paddleboard. The next, he was going down a water slide. And the next, he was doing something in a rubber ring or something. And I thought, wow, he's the sort of fella that needs to run our country. You got Starman and Sunak, wearing high-vis vests and talking to people in industry. And you got this bloke on a paddleboard. I thought, why not? But I think the reality, they all got to deliver housing. They all have to, for Labour to stay in office, assuming they get in, then they have to deliver housing. And I don't hear any words that are a quick fix to permitted development.
No.
So it has to stay, doesn't it? To answer your question, it has to stay.
What is interesting, though, is that, everybody's talking about PD and the potential for creating slum housing and so on and so forth, simply because commercial buildings weren't designed to be residential in the first place. But, you can be really creative with this stuff. You can make absolutely beautiful homes using PD and on the conversions, And what people actually forget is that the ability to change commercial buildings into residentials have been around for a long, long time. The current Class G, where you can take a commercial building and have a few flats above it, that's been around since 1995, if not before. So you're talking a long, long time, 30 odd years it's been around. So, all this thing about, oh my God, we got a scrap PD, it's been part of our planning since like almost forever. If anything, I think that PD is going to be enhanced, to make things a bit easier. And as you say, if they do incorporate affordable housing and so on, it just creates a level playing field, don't you think?
Oh, I think so. And I think let's go back to this point about the slums. Okay. Well, I mean, that's an easy one to jump on. And it's all political.
Yeah.
We've created the slums of the future. There's no such thing as a building that you can't convert into a really nice residential scheme. We at propertyCEO wrote, the one and only book on industrial conversions.
Yeah.
How do you convert an industrial building to residential? Well, there is a way to do it, and there's a way to do it very nicely, and you can get some fantastic homes of the future. Manhattan Lofts. Let's look at Manhattan Lofts. From the States, created some lovely urban designs. So there's no excuse for poor design. Problem is, what happens is it's like anything, and it's not a criticism of the rules that went in. The rules got put into place, and of course, there's loopholes, and the rules were abused. The rules got tightened up. We now have to provide adequate natural light into all habitable rooms. So we can't build slums of the future, but it's like anything. It's like, I don't know, motorways. Motorways got introduced, and I suspect if we go back in time, people will go, I mean, it's horrific. It's a license for people to speed and kill people. But then they brought rules in and they brought cameras in. And whether you agree with all that or not, what they did is they introduced something which fundamentally has probably changed the way we communicate and travel for the better, one would suggest. And they bring some rules in to control it. And I think that's all they've done on PD. So I think the whole PD slums of the future, headline grabbing by journalists or political parties or anyone who thinks, let's get a headline out there. The bottom line is that's BS if you understand how to design properly. The rules have now made us design properly. And I think, let's be fair, the majority of the developers in this country, and I know a lot of them, and I train a lot of them. That's what we do. We train small-scale developers, as most people would know. All want to do good development. They all have a conscience. They want to build homes. They don't want to build slums. There's a few, but the rules will tighten that up for people.
What
was the question you asked me? Because I just went off on that random.
I've got no idea. I don't think it matters. But I mean, this tightening up of the rules, I mean, it all came about with the infamous Watford case where a developer actually took an industrial building and quite rightly complied with all the PD rights at the time, and he built it without any windows. They do. They introduced, the need for natural light in all habitable rooms. So these changes are actually a good thing. And once again, it is a leveler. Everybody has to comply with these rules and we all have to have the same battles as well. So, and when we look at our students, and we have got quite a few of the guys now, when we look at our students, they're actually producing some really good designs. We've got in-house architects, as you know, and together we collaborate from the planning, the architecture, and we have courtyards and we have this and we have that. We actually, create really nice schemes, which are an absolute pleasure to be involved with, and great for the future occupants as well. I'm not just a sounding board to say how great propertyCEO is. What I am saying is that this thing about creating slums, in my opinion, and you agree with me, is absolute nonsense. Anyway.
It is. I remember the question now, but so the question was about, I think the original question there was about the level playing field and the rules changing and what Labour might do.
Well done.
I think the couple of old codgers here together today, folks. Anyway, look, I think the reality is, and I go back, Labour cannot fix the planning system. Labour are going to have to work with permitted development rights. They have not made one announcement or comment that they've got some other crazy idea that they're going to bring in. So they're going to work with it, okay? I've heard stories where people are saying Labour, socialist government are going to bring in 50% social housing to permitted development. Okay, look, so what? So what if they do? Because someone then said, then it'll make all schemes uneconomical. I said, no, that doesn't. That's BS again, because the reality is, you're going to pay less for that commercial stock, less for that commercial building. Unfortunately, the people that own those commercial buildings are going to get less than what they would get ordinarily. Okay. But that would be a level playing field. If we had to provide 50% housing, then we would pay far less for that commercial building. We would pay far less for the building and construction materials. Yeah. And then people will go, well, yeah, but they can't do it for less. Okay, well then they don't get any work. They all go out of business.
Yeah.
The government, if the Labour government, they won't let that happen. They can't let that happen. They have to deliver housing. So there's no way that a Labour government are going to put in place rules that make it impossible for small-scale developers to build housing, because I think I'm right in saying that Labour, and we might talk about Grey Belt in a minute, interestingly, but I think Labour have said the majority of the housing that they want to deliver is going to come out of Grey Belt being one, some Green Belt, but equally brownfield land. Yeah. Brownfield land. And brownfield land is the conversion of existing commercial buildings into residential that are empty.
Exactly.
And what we know is that apart from the biggest of those commercial buildings, but the way the PD rights work, Barratt, Persimmon, Bellway, all of you out there aren't going to be interested in it. And I get that. You don't get out of bed for 200,000 or 300,000 profit. Whereas as small scale developers, we get into bed for 200,000 or 300,000 profit. We love that. And so I think the interesting fact is that, 1.5 million, 30% of those homes used to be built by small scale developers. So 500,000 potentially could be built by small scale developers over the term of the Labour government if Labour encourage PD and encourage small scale developers, because PD brings the money to the table. That's the biggest thing. It's about certainty and it's about lack of risk. And it means we as small scale developers can bring the money to the table. And I think how many homes have we delivered under PD for small scale developers? Do you know how many homes we delivered?
I heard a figure of between 100 and 150,000 have actually been produced under permitted development rights.
Over what period?
I think it's over the last 5 years.
Okay.
Something like that. It's judged by the number of applications that have gone into the councils.
So 30,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have 1.2, 1.3, the number changes, million homes that can be built out of brownfield land. So yes. I understand from the stats. Yes. So the only way, if I was sat there and if the Labour government had the mind to ring me up and say, Ritchie, how are we going to build these homes? How are we going to deliver it? I can tell you. Okay. And the reality is, make the permitted development system easier. Work. And I don't know how you solve this one, but because one of the problems is the local planning authorities still will find a reason to not accept a PD rather than find a reason to. Yes. We're not on the same song sheet, local authorities and central government. Well, of course, they're all political parties in objection to each other.
Yeah.
So Labour are going to have to crack that objection, perhaps by a conservative or liberal run local authority, and get them all into line in some way, because it's going to be beneficial for those local authorities, and get them to find reasons to accept permitted development rights as opposed to reasons why not. And whether that's making the rules really simple and black and white and no shades of grey, or whatever it is, okay, and encouraging it, and then we can encourage small-scale developers to get into the industry. They're entrepreneurs and looking to a side hustle. They're looking for something, because this can be a side hustle. I know it's 200,000-300,000 a year, but generally, folks, this is a side hustle. And if you can encourage, maybe even by tax breaks, put a tax break in for small-scale developers to come into the industry, they could deliver over the next 5 years 500,000 homes easy. Because there's capacity within the brownfield land, if not more, if you encourage them to come in. And on that basis, they're going to tweak something, because they have to, because it's the new broom sweeps clean. I used to buy companies. When I buy a company, you go in, you have to change something to let people know you're there. Otherwise, if it's business as usual, it's not acceptable. So they're going to do something. But there's no way, in my opinion, they're going to suddenly put all these rules in. Yeah, they're going to probably tweak something for social housing, but that's not a bad thing. We need more social housing. But, they're going to be sensible, because otherwise they're not going to get anywhere near the homes. If you cut off the PD pipeline, and they know this, that's why they say they're going to deliver out brownfield land. And they know Barratt, Persimmon and Bellways aren't going to do that. So there's no way they're going to change the rules fundamentally. That would be my opinion.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, any form of legislatively changes, that's difficult to say. Any of those sort of
Well,
changes,
though, you did very well.
they could take years to actually implement. And during the next reign, as it was, about 4 years long, roughly, isn't it? And yeah, it's going to take that long just to make those sort of changes. You think about it, all of the raft of changes they were going to do with PD, and it didn't come about. And it takes an awfully long time. So they really got to get their ducks in a row to implement any of this. So it's probably a lot easier just to keep it as it is. Now, what about all this grey belt nonsense? What on earth is that all about, really? I mean, my understanding of it is that we've got green belt, and green belt is basically a ring which goes around the London area and the Greater London. You have metropolitan green belt and so on, and it's there to protect the open countryside for its own right. And we get that. That's absolutely fine. But isn't it interesting that permitted development can still be used in Greenbelt? So what was the thinking there? Obviously, they want to use PD and they want to use it for development. And then they introduced this other thing. They called it brown belt. Yeah. Brownfield. Yeah. I'm not talking about judo. We're talking about brownfield land. Yeah. Now, brownfield is previously developed land. So that is, as you said earlier, it's all to do with the conversion and the changing of existing buildings. And in all of this chat with the both parties, none of them have talked about building use classes, the use class E, and how flexible it is. And it was brought in for an absolute reason, because our spending habits and how we actually do commerce has changed radically. They haven't talked about that at all. And they've now introduced this new thing called grey belt. What the heck's that all about? Is it just mucky green belt? Is it brownfield land, which is, well, we want to preserve it, but we don't really. They're not really defining it at all, are they? They did talk about car parks, but how many car parks are there to redevelop? Not that many, I wouldn't think. There's certainly a few disused buildings and so on, but we're doing it already. So basically, do you think that a grey belt is just another vote catching soundbite, clickbait? What's it all about? It's just something they seem to have dreamed up recently.
Is grey belt a catchy vote grabber? Yes, I would probably say it is. Has it got any value to it? I think you could argue yes and no. I mean, I get what they're saying is let's not dig up the countryside, but let's redevelop. And their examples are old petrol stations and car parks that exist in this peripheral sort of area that need to be redeveloped. Well, that's great, that's fine, but that doesn't help small scale developers. Okay, and that's one of the big things. So there's big developments going on. The big house players are out there. And I'll be honest, if this grey belt, as their definition, can be developed, it's already been targeted by these developers and being targeted probably with little resistance because it's got to be done. So I don't see that as a major change that they're releasing that. And suddenly there's this great support. Oh, my God, we never realized that grey belt stuff was there. Why don't we develop that? The big house builders have been all over that stuff for years. And identified these areas and tackled these areas, as I say, perhaps with little resistance, rightly so, because they're eyesores. But the comment to me, and I heard or I read somewhere, I'd listened to someone else commenting on it, that it would be great. It would be great for the small scale developers to do the grey belt. And I went, BS again. It doesn't work because at the moment, unless they bring it in, and they could do. Fundamentally, we don't have planning permission. And this is the problem. And I think the problem that some people miss when they're trying to understand how you encourage entrepreneurs to come in and become small-scale developers. Because that's the bottom line. Okay, we don't need to encourage barracks and bellways and stuff. They've got their big schemes, but they only develop in certain ways. We need to, because Labour can hit their numbers. Labour, if you watch this, you can hit your numbers out of the redevelopment of brownfield land over the term of your political office, and then you'll be voted straight back in if it was purely based on housing, because the stock is there. No one objects to it being in their backyard because these rundown, empty commercial buildings need redevelopment. Infrastructure is already there. So huge Section 106 payments to provide new doctor surgeries. Maybe they've got to be enhanced, but the infrastructure is there, whether that's schools, colleges, doctors, hospitals. Maybe they have to be enhanced, sure. But equally, infrastructure in terms of services, waste and supply, electricity, water, etc. So they're in an ideal location. And it goes back to this understanding of how an entrepreneur works, and how an entrepreneur who we tempt a lot. I mean, in the room the other day, I remember we counted up, Colin, do you remember we counted up 61 million worth of GDV that month in the room of deals have been secured, and we worked that back to 400 homes.
400,
400 homes of new entrepreneurs coming into the market. Well, we can do so many more if we can encourage them in. And the thing is, what unlocks it, these entrepreneurs have limited budgets. The entrepreneurs, by definition, are often people that are going to create something out of nothing. They don't come with pots of money, otherwise they probably wouldn't be doing it. Okay, which means they have to limit their risk, which means they can't go and buy a bit of land, be it grey belt, okay, on the hope that they might get planning, because they're having to go even in grey belt, unless Labour are going to come in and announce some permitted development rights to build new build housing on grey belt, and I don't foresee that happening. I think that's too complicated. Unless they're going to do that, grey belt still requires you to go in the planning system, which still means it's fraught with risk. No one wants it in their backyard, and you're not guaranteed you're going to get planning permission for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 12, maybe 24 months. In which case you're not going to buy that bit of land. So as an entrepreneur, you're not going to invest in that business opportunity. So grey belt for small scale developers is a waste of time. Frankly is. Small scale developers need certainty of planning, which only PD gives them, because that gives them the ability to raise the funds. There are plenty of specialist development funders out there which will support schemes that's got PD and let you buy that land and fund 100% of the build cost because you've got that certainty. And so grey belt, love it, great title. Yes, it needs redeveloping, but it ain't for small scale developers.
No, there's too much speculation in there. It's what you call the hope value, isn't it? You're hoping it's going to turn out okay, but whereas when you just go for the easy route with this permitted development and changes of use, then that's obviously the better route to go. There are other PD rights available. You've got airspace, for example. You can even knock down a building and replace it with a block of flats if you want to. But these are very much close to normal full planning applications. You know, there's so many restrictions on those, whereas developing good old-fashioned brownfield land, which is just conversions of what's already there, is infinitely easier. Well, not infinitely, but greatly easier anyway. You know, we've only got 5 conditions to comply with, for goodness sake, and none of it is that subjective if you get the right information there in the first place. So yeah, I think PD's there to stay. One little quick thing about the S106 obligations, just to fill it in. This thing about wanting affordable housing and so on, we touched on it earlier. There's a very fundamental point here, okay? S106 is Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and it was basically put in place as a contract between the planning authority and the developer, and it's there to make schemes more acceptable. Okay, so we can tweak them. We might need more infrastructure. We might need some highways improvements. We might need a new roundabout or something like that. Those sort of things aren't necessarily covered by planning policy, but they are definitely needed. So therefore, they have this mechanism called Section 106 to actually implement those. Now, you think about that for a moment. How on earth are you going to rewrite the Town and Country Planning Act in that particular section, which is already really complicated and requires a lot of legal jargon? We've got loads of solicitors getting involved. We've actually having a S106 in place. That's not going to happen. So I actually think, just to recap very quickly, personally, I don't see affordable housing being a part of PD. I really, really don't. That's my threepence worth anyway. So
I
there we
don't
go.
mind if it is. And I sort of think maybe it should be okay, but I think you don't have to. So affordable housing is an interesting one because there are so many needs within affordable housing. There are emergency housing requirements that we need in this country desperately. There is pure affordable housing, people that don't have that ability to go and buy their own home and need an
Sure,
affordable
sure.
rent. Various needs, special needs of various descriptions. And I think what's interesting is the reality. Sometimes those providers, those service providers who look after, because sometimes it's within local authorities, sometimes it's private organizations,
Yes.
will often happily pay more for the right product in the right place.
Mm.
And so, as a developer, and certainly we have experience of this in propertyCEO with a number of our students who've done deals with, housing providers who have
Yeah.
various special needs supplies,
Yeah.
and they
Registered
get a
providers.
premium above
Mm.
market rates
Mm.
for building a product specifically. It might not be enhanced in terms of the quality of the fixtures and finishes, but it might be enhanced in terms of the durability of fixtures and finishes for
Yeah.
whoever they're going to occupy or housing that area. And so I think it wouldn't be complicated to enhance the PD rights over certain numbers and certain schemes. And I don't think it's not 5 or 10 or 15 or whatever, but it could be over 15 or 20, maybe over 20 numbers. That there is a number of social housing. Let's not call it affordable. Let's call it a number of social housings that you can put in there that you can give up, but they don't have to be at cost. And that's what kills a scheme. You
Mm.
just have to understand the mindset of an entrepreneur to understand how you can deliver and accept both parties. So if an entrepreneur can say, that's fine, I'm going to deliver these that are reduced profit, because entrepreneurs don't get out of bed unless they make profit. And whatever government you are, if you're Labour, you need entrepreneurs to help deliver your 1.5 million housing, or 1.6 if you're Remainers Conservatives.
Mm.
You need entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs don't get out of bed unless they make profit. So don't tell them they've got to do 50% of their housing at cost, because they won't. They don't make profit. But if you can actually have some social housing at a reduced profitability,
Which is different. Yeah.
and in turn, the marketplace, the social housing providers will pay that reasonable amount of money.
Mm.
You will deliver your housing. You can tweak the PD rights and get it delivered by your small scale developers out of your brownfield land, where generally these people want to live anyway, because that's
Yeah.
where their communities are. So
I don't know. I think we ought to vote Ritchie for Prime Minister, don't you?
I, you know, I actually,
I mean,
someone
that's
the other day
so
said,
sensible.
Colin, I was presenting the other day somewhere, and someone said, "I have a question." I said, "Oh, yeah, what's your question?" They said, why don't you become the housing minister for government?" I said, "No, thank you."
No, thank you.
I said, they said, and then someone did shout out, "You could run." I went, "Worst job in the world." I mean, I applaud any politician who wants to step up and think they're going to run the country, because wow. I mean, any entrepreneur that knows out there, running your own business is complicated enough. Running the country, when half the country probably hate you anyway, just because of your
Yes.
political diversion, it's like, is it a job you want? I don't. But I think what I try and do is cut through the crap. Let's just understand it. It's not complicated. And I don't think, and I know I go on rants, and I'm going on a rant today because I'm being interviewed, so I can be. I'm not
You're allowed to. Yeah.
allowed to, aren't I? Am I allowed to?
Yeah, just about.
Just about. So the point is this, people that are putting commentary out on the election and scaremongering, in my view, the scaremongering the entrepreneurs that we need in this country to come and do small scale development by saying, "Oh yeah, well, social government will come in and this and this and this, and the Labour would." They won't, and they're not as socialist as they used to be, and they can't, because they've got to deliver housing. So no, it's not. And again, what do? I'm a half full, not a half empty. I will try and find reasons why we can do stuff as opposed to reasons why we can't. I don't care whether Labour get in, Conservatives get in, or the bloke off the paddleboard. In fact, I prefer the bloke on the paddleboard. I don't know what he stands for. He's my kind of guy. Okay.
Yeah, bit
I
more
reckon,
light-hearted.
I don't mind paddleboarding. I quite like paddleboarding. I don't mind falling off. So we could go paddleboarding on a Sunday afternoon and run the country on a Monday to Friday. But my point is you know, we have to just like say how it is. I'm a fairly black and white person. You just say it how it is, and we can get around it. We can work together. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you know what? I think time's nearly up, isn't it?
Probably.
Yeah. We could rant on for hours, couldn't we, about this? I mean, it is a bit of a thorny subject, actually quite interesting as well. There's lots of other things that we could cover. You know, for instance, Labour has now pledged to have 300 new planning officers, and you know, and do things with changing stamp duties and God knows what. And you know, we need dramatic investment in our planning system. That's absolutely for true. So that is something that we hopefully can look forward to in the future. Anyway, there we are. I think time's nearly up. I want to thank you, Ritchie. That's been fun, actually. We might have to do that again, a little bit of an interview.
I think we should. And I think the bottom line is, look, guys, girls, anyone listening to this, don't worry about a change of government. And I've never had in any business I've been in.
No.
Work with whatever that government's going to do, and they're not going to suddenly change the system. I mean, I'll eat my hat if I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. So don't worry about it.
Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up now. So if you'd like to know more about Property CEO, if you'd like to know more about planning and hacks and tricks, okay, then you need to get in contact with us. Okay, you can email us, and there will be a link in the old description below there. Support at Property CEO. But they also offer, and this is madness, he actually offers a free half-day workshop. My God, it's called the 6-Figure Roadmap. Okay, and all you need to do is email us at Property CEO. It's propertyceo.co.uk/SFR, 6-Figure Roadmap. Okay, so there you go. Once again, thank you very much, Ritchie. That was fun, and I'll be seeing you soon. So thanks very much indeed, and thanks guys for watching.